interpretation myself, so that Georgi, our translator, will be able to follow along as well. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to everyone from everywhere in the world that we have people joining us. We were just doing an early check and found out we have people in Vienna, in Cairo, in Ireland, and in Serbia, as well as in Tbilisi and in, I'm here in Baku. To introduce myself and the project very quickly, I'm Mary Matthews. I'm the Chief Technical Advisor for the UNDP-GEF Kura 2 project. And this meeting is the final workshop to present the pre-feasibility study for the pollution abatement plan for poultry, Georgia. We will go into more details about this shortly and very much look forward to everyone's active participation. This morning, I will turn over first to Anna Chernyshova, who is the UNDP resident representative for the country office in Georgia, and her comments will be followed by Marina Makarova, our national focal point. Anna, welcome and thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary. Can you hear me, colleagues? Yeah, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Mary, for upgrading my position. Actually, I'm the we had a little bit of last-minute change. It should have been Louisa, but due to last-minute arrangements, she cannot attend.
Could you please choose English channel on interpretation so that those who are in Georgian channel can hear the translation?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Sorry. Okay, that means I will have to repeat everything from the beginning. Maybe it will be a better version. Anyway, thank you, Mary, for the introduction. And just to correct that, I'm not a resident representative yet, but I'm the deputy resident representative. And that was the last minute change. Unfortunately, Louisa cannot attend today, so she asked me to step in. As you know, we see your project as one of the most important projects in the region, and not just for Georgia, but for the whole region. And just preparing for this opening, I thought that since childhood, we've been taught that rivers are arteries of the earth. And if the arteries in human body are not clean, are not working well, the whole body is also dysfunctional. So just to start a little opening with this comparison of the rivers to the arteries of the body, I also would like to welcome our colleagues and partners from the Ministry of Environment and Agriculture in Georgia and other participants. I can see it's a really multinational workshop. As we all know, the good water quality together with an adequate quantity of water are necessary for achieving the sustainable development goals for health, food security, and water security. And it's important to take actions to protect and restore water quality. And all of this is linked to achieve the sustainable development goals and post-2015 development agenda. Unfortunately, severe organic pollution already affects a lot of rivers in the world. And as many of you know, because many of you are experts, that 80% of sewage in developing countries is discharged untreated, polluting rivers, lakes, and coastal areas. And most of it is linked to the growing population. Wastewater loading to rivers and lakes, ultimate causes are population growth, increased economic activity, intensification of expansion of agriculture, and many other factors. But speaking about this problem, we need to remember that who is actually affected by the polluted rivers, and thinking of leaving no one behind in this situation, because the groups who are most affected by the polluted waters women because of their frequent usage of the surface water for household activities, and children because of their play activities in local surface waters, and because many of the people living along the rivers, they actually use this water for drinking. Although maybe this is not the case for Kura River situation. So with this, actually I looked at the agenda of this workshop, and I think it has already some answers, or at least some ideas for the how to address the problem. We know that to address any problem, we first need to accept that it exists and also look at the factors underlying the problem and then discuss the way forward. Obviously, Georgia or Azerbaijan and other countries are not the first who will be addressing this issue. There are many good examples in the world. We all know the example of Switzerland, when anyone can drink water from anywhere in Switzerland, any lake, any river, without any problem. And so examples exist around the world how governments and people can address polluting of the rivers. Obviously, number one is accepting that the problem exists and then agreeing on the steps and some legal actions and other things to prevent rivers from being polluted. So with this, I'm really happy to be part of this workshop, and once again, welcome everyone, and thank you, Mary, for all your work you are doing for the countries to keep us safe and clean. And we hope that this will result in a very good workshop and some really concrete activities. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anna, and thank you for joining us and accepting your early promotion on my behalf. Also, thank you for reminding us that even in very developed countries like Switzerland, it is possible to have water that is running in the rivers that is so clean that you can actually drink directly from the source. Merit McNass, we will have this in Georgia one day soon. On that note, I would like to ask Marina Makarova, who is with the Ministry of Environment Protection and Agriculture in Georgia, and I think one of our longest term supporters of the Kura project, as well as our national focal point, to please make some introductory remarks.
Thank you, Mary. Დილამ შვიდობისა, გარემოს დაცვისა და სოფლის მეურნეობის სამინისტროს სახელით მოგესალმებით ყველას, ძალიან მიხარია თქვენი ნახვა და
I'm very happy to see you. And I've lost audio. I no longer hear her. I'm sorry. She's on mute. She accidentally muted herself, I believe.
Marina, dear, it seems you have muted yourself, and we've missed what you've said.
Could you please choose Russian as Georgian channel, because I think Marina didn't choose any language as well, and when she talks, we also hear interpreter's voice.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, but if you will speak in Georgian, go to the Russian channel.
But I have not such icon here.
Okay, for right now, let's do consecutive instead of simultaneous.
If when I'm speaking into Russian channel, we are talking into separate channels, I can
have
continue
not
on the Russian channel.
Translation icon at my desktop, but I always was participating without this, and can you hear?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, okay. Can I continue in Georgian? Okay. So, დილამ შვიდობისა,
So I will speak into the Russian channel then, not talk into the same channel with her.
Okay.
სამინისტროს სახელით მოგესალმებით სულ ყველას. სამწუხაროდ ისევ ონლაინ რეჟიმში ხვდებით, მაგრამ მინდა აღნიშნო, რომ საბედნიეროდ მიუხედავად არსებული სიტუაციისა, პროექტი აგრძელებს ძალიან აქტიურ მუშაობას, რაც მისასალმებელია ჩვენი მხრიდან და ძალიან მნიშვნელოვანია, რომ ესეთი მნიშვნელოვანი კომპონენტები მაინც და მაინც სრულდება გეგმის მიხედვით. ყველასთვის ცნობილია, რომ წყლის რესურსების დაბინძურება, როგორც ზედაპირული, ასევე მიწისქვეშა, არის ძალიან სერიოზული პრობლემა საქართველოსთვის და ბოლო წლების განმავლობაში მიუხედავად გარკვეული მიღებული ზომებისა, მაინც რჩება დიდ პრობლემად.
It remains a problem. It remains an issue. That's why it's so important for us to work on finding some solutions. And it's also very crucial to have this foreign support of our international colleagues. I would like to use this chance to offer my thanks to international experts, because we did learn a lot. And we did learn a lot of practical things as well. Quite a lot of aid was provided. For instance, I can give you an example, the plan on prevention of pollution that was created jointly. We need to acquaint ourselves with new technologies. We need to know new treatment methodologies, because, as it has been mentioned already, it's quite important to retain our rivers pure, because to begin with, it's an issue related to health of human beings. And in order to ensure good quality of life for our population, we need to improve the quality of our water to begin with. It seems to me like the work that has been done might be dubbed quite interesting. And in the course of today's meeting, in the course of listening to presentations, we will have a chance to listen to some new ideas, to some new findings. And all of this should be expanded, of course, and applied to the country throughout its territory, being carried out through different pollution sources that we have now. Once again, thank you very much, and let me wish you a successful meeting today. Thank you.
So much, Marina, and I can honestly say it has been an absolute pleasure to work with you on this and on these improvements over these many years together. Let me introduce the director of Poultry Georgia, Zurab Chuchulashvili, for opening remarks, please. Do we have Zurab Chuchulashvili?
Here, but he is on mute.
Ah, okay. I see him now. Is he muted?
No, but
Ah, there he is. Yes, I see his face. Zurab Chuchulashvili, can we ask you for opening remarks, dear? We seem to be having a bit of a technical problem.
With his iPhone now, I think.
Right. The fact that none of us had to get on an airplane for this makes it worthwhile. These are small snafus compared to having to be exposed. Zura, dear, will you be Gamojava? Yes, it worked.
Unfortunately, for some reason, I cannot move on to the Georgian channel, and I do not speak English. I know Georgian.
Okay,
So
let
how
us
should I
switch
continue?
over.
Go ahead.
ქართულად განაგზეთ, მე რუსულ არხზე ვილაპარაკებ. I'm very happy to be here. I would like to thank everyone who is here and who is participating and who used to participate. It was a very interesting project. That I looked through its details. Seems like everything is very close to EU standards, yeah, according to this project. But I'm sure that there will be problems to be encountered in the course of its implementation, because it's a little bit on the expensive side of things. But anyway, we are very happy and very grateful that today we do know what do we need in order to be up to scratch, in order to be compliant with every standard from the standpoint of treatment facilities, not only in the slaughterhouse, but throughout the facility, throughout our place. That's it on my part.
Okay, thank you so much. I will now switch to the
my apologies. My apologies. One thing more. In the course of the questions and answers, when we move on to this question and answer session, I do have a number of requests, and probably I will have a chance to talk about some specific tangible things then.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I will switch now to the English language channel. And for everyone, for the upcoming presentations, these will be in English, and interpretation in Georgian will be in the Russian language channel, so that everyone, Mert Miknas, will be able to hear everything that we are saying in the meeting. Very briefly, for anyone who is joining us, who is not entirely familiar with the UNDP-GEF Kura 2 project, briefly, our project is to help the countries of Azerbaijan and Georgia harmonize water use policies and practices within and between the countries of Azerbaijan and Georgia. This particular output, this particular component, is really very important because we are the 21st transboundary project focusing on transboundary water management since the year 2000. There has been a lot of work done on monitoring and water quality and improving monitoring and harmonizing water monitoring. This project has actually been very active in taking the next step, which is working with industries like Poultry Georgia to improve the water quality by actually empowering and teaching what needs to be done to abate the water pollution, to stop the pollution at the source, and to make improvements that will, in Georgia, meet with the EU association agreement requirements towards the EU Water Framework Directive. And we are very happy to have had the opportunity to do that. I will now turn over to my esteemed colleague, Mr. Ahmed Abu El Sayed, also known as Engineer Ahmed, who has been a driving force with this, given his vast experience both in this region, but even greater experience in Egypt and in the Middle East, working on water quality issues. Ahmed, if you would please discuss a bit more about the objectives for this component and the output.
Yes, thank you, Mary, and good morning, everybody, and welcome to this last workshop for this component or this activity and output, because this actually related to two components in our project. The component 1, output 1.4, and component 3, which is 3.2. And in component 1, we already developed pollution abatement plan guideline for two major sectors, polluting sectors in Georgia, which is the slaughterhouse and the dairy sectors. And thanks for our international experts and national experts who contributed together to develop these guidelines. Also, for component 3.2, we have a detailed pre-feasibility study for one of the facilities, which is Poultry, Georgia. And I would like to thank the company management who allowed us to go and investigate and cooperated with us to make environmental audit and assessment for the facility and develop a detailed pollution abatement plan. And also we evaluated this pollution abatement plan measures economically through a economical assessment. And this will be presented today, and we'll have a discussion about this. We invited in this workshop, we tried to invite all the concerned financiers who are concerned about environment and pollution in order to build synergy between the private sector and the financing agencies in order to help the companies who are wishing to have a compliance action plan and pollution reduction plans, but they seek financial support. So we are trying to build this synergy between the two, the financing agencies and the private sectors. And hopefully this workshop will end up having some pave the road for this kind of cooperation between this private sector and financing agencies. This project or this activities is directly linked to the strategic outcome 4 in the strategic action program that has been approved by the two countries, which is pollution reduction and prevention. And we hope by setting up this mechanism for cleaner production and pollution abatement plans to help the two countries, not only here in Georgia, but also in Azerbaijan, in adopting this mechanism in future projects and in the existing facilities in order to have a more cleaner transpound the rivers and water bodies, and to reduce the pollution load going to these rivers. Saying that, I would like to go back to Mary.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. And again, thank you for your guidance and support throughout this entire process. It has been quite an adventure. And again, it has been the start of what we hope will be something very positive for the country of Georgia, as well as for the businesses and for the finance sector. We are recording this so that this will be available in both languages on our project webpage as a webinar in case anyone is not able to catch everything here. On the next note, I'm very happy to have Tom Stafford with us, who is serving as the project consultant for environmental law enforcement. Tom comes to us from Dublin, Ireland, where he has excellent experience in implementing the EU Water Framework Directive and in identifying and working with the laws there to abate the pollution abatement, or the pollution occurring in the area. Tom has been an absolute gem of a consultant to work with and brings a great deal of insight to the work we're doing here. Tom, I'd like to turn over to you for your presentation on the main polluting hotspots in the Kura River Basin in Georgia.
Thanks, Mary. I hope everybody can hear, and I'm now attempting to share the presentation screen, so hopefully that all goes well. If you can just confirm that we can see it. And that,
yes, we can.
Excellent. And from the translation point of view, the translator can hear me and we're ready to go. Very good. So good morning, everybody, and thanks, Mary, for that introduction. As Mary said, I work in Ireland, and I have worked for many years in the Irish Environmental Protection Agency, dealing with a lot of the problems that we had in Ireland many years ago with water pollution from industry and from our urban wastewater facilities. And it is a difficult problem to grapple with, and we understand the difficulties that countries face, particularly countries which are now trying to align with EU standards. We've had that difficulty in Ireland. It has taken us a long time to try and meet those standards, and we're still working on it, to be honest. So we recognize how big a task this is. So just a little bit about what we did in Georgia. We were asked to look at the main polluting hotspots in the Kura Basin in Georgia. And I suppose the first thing that we did was to work with our sorry, one sec. There we go. To work with the local experts and in the ministry to try and identify what we thought were the main sectors that were giving rise to pollution in the Kura Basin. And we gathered all the data that was available, and we sat down and we had some workshops and we went through it. And again, a lot of local knowledge came into play here. And ultimately, we settled on two kind of key sectors, one being the slaughtering and the meat sector, and the other being the dairying sector, the dairy sector. Again, these are the effluents from the food sector can be very high strength effluent and can have a lot of impact on the environment. And that's really the main reason for that. So what I'm going to try and cover here is a little bit of the main findings that we had from that study and how we've progressed on. I suppose from that, and Alexandra will talk a little bit, or well, a lot about the pollution abatement plans, which are very specific plans for poultry Georgia. This really is higher level in terms of looking broadly at the sector. Sorry, now we've got too many pages down. go. Next slide. Yeah. Okay. So, what I just mentioned that we tried to get a good understanding of the situation in Georgia, and I suppose I think it was mentioned there that a lot of our findings are very aligned to the EU situation, and we certainly did use the EU BAT standards and any standards we could find for comparison. But we also looked much more broadly at any other guidelines we could find for those sectors, including the World Bank standards in Russia, in India as well, and obviously looking at the standards that are emerging in Serbia, which again are aligning to EU standards. So we looked at as many kind of standards as we could for a comparison, just to see what kind of levels we would be recommending for the industry sector in Georgia. Again, just to put a bit of context in it, you're all very aware about the size of Georgia, about 3.7 million people, which is very similar to Ireland actually. And again, you've got a very rural economy, about 1.7 million living in rural areas. And agriculture accounts for, we see about 45% of rural income. I think the difference, the key difference that I see between Georgia and European countries like Ireland, like I said, we've a very big agriculture sector. The statistics are very similar in terms of the percentage of land and agriculture and so on. But the size of the holdings in Georgia is very small, with about 77% less than 1 hectare. So it's a very local and direct production to market situation in Georgia, which is probably quite unique in that context. And when we look then at the slaughtering facilities, we can see that kind of follows on in that we see very small slaughtering facilities in Georgia. In the Kura Basin, we were able to identify about 29 different slaughtering facilities, and as I said, really the maximum capacity of the biggest ones was really about 500 tons per year. In a European context, we classify these as being really micro facilities. So, and I think that if you look at the graph, you'll see that the number of employees there is, 10 or less in general. So these are quite small activities on a European scale. So we were mindful of that in terms of the standards we use as well. So I saw that David is one of the pictures on Zoom there, and David and Maya did a lot of site visits around to try and get a flavor of the standards that were in place in the slaughtering sectors. And these are some photos of some of the slaughtering facilities they visited. And we can see, some of the issues already. Again, as I said, they're small. The processing areas are a little bit, what we say, in disarray there, or they're not really at the standard we would be looking at, even from a veterinary or a health and safety perspective. And from an environmental perspective, then we can see, there's lots of things going on here in terms of contaminants going to the water environment that we're particularly interested in. And down in the bottom left hand, you will see that there's blood there just going directly into this collector drain and onward out into the environment. And blood has a very high BOD level, so it's quite a significant contaminant. So that's just really to give a flavor of the type of and scale of facilities that we were looking at in the slaughtering sector. So the key issues that were identified really was the absence of any wastewater treatment, which meant that the wastewater from these facilities were generally going straight into a river or into a soak away and into the groundwater. So there was very little evidence of any treatment on that. And again, there was really not much segregation of the waste streams. So what we would expect to see or hope to see is segregation of blood and the various components being collected to be managed separately so that they don't make their way out to the water environment. And again, a lot of the animal byproducts, the fleshings and bones and so on, were being sent to landfill, and there didn't appear to be any segregation out of what we would call specified risk material for particular treatment. So those are issues of concern, I suppose, that we would raise. The type of improvement measures that we were recommending across the sector, I mean the low-cost measures, and again, Sacha will talk a little bit more about these, but clearly things like separating out those high BOD contaminants like blood and so on, and the intestinal contents that come from the animals, minimizing the water use during the cleaning of stomachs and intestines, as much dry cleaning processes as you can, and collecting any of the solid byproducts into a container. Simple things we would say, like fitting hand-operated triggers to water hoses to stop water continually running in the plant. Put in some dedicated water meters to monitor exactly what the consumption of water is, turning off taps after use, and removing solids from the wastewater stream. And again, also the fat, fats and greases, which are a particular issue, and particularly if the slaughtering facility is discharging to municipal sewer, fats, oils, and greases cause particular problems in terms of blockages there. So these are the lower cost, cleaner production type of initiatives that we would be recommending, and would be recommending in any event before we even get into building wastewater treatment plants or any level of wastewater treatment. If these types of measures are implemented, you could make reductions in water consumption of possibly up to 47%, and in your wastewater, reduce the volume by about 24%, with big reductions in BOD and suspended solids there of possibly 50% in the cattle slaughtering area. Smaller in pig slaughtering, generally because we tend to reuse more of the pig carcass than we do for beef, but still there are substantial savings that can be made there by what we would term to be reasonably simple measures. So in the dairy sector, the picture is quite similar, I suppose. Again, Georgia consumes quite an amount of dairy products, and it supplies or manages to produce the majority of those dairy products, but still imports a reasonable amount from abroad, which I suppose is surprising to some extent, given the fairly lush green countryside we see in Georgia, that there isn't more production of dairy there. This slide is really just to show again that I suppose the supply chain in Georgia is very focused on the small scale production, and nearly all of the milk that's produced in Georgia is either consumed at home or processed at home into generally that smoked cheese, and so there's very little industrial scale production of milk or milk processing in Georgia. And again, when we look at the size of the facilities, we see here that they tend to be small, and again, in that micro sector. And again, some of David's photos of what would even be some of the larger scale dairy producers there. And, we can see again that the production facilities would be below the standards we would expect to see in Europe from a hygiene perspective and so on, in terms of the finish of those production halls and so on. And the pictures down on the right hand side, they might look a little bit weird, but what that is that, and David can explain, but we understand that the effluent pipe goes into, use my mouse, goes into this soak away area here. That's just where the effluent goes. And this picture here is just showing that that's right beside the river. So there's very little in terms, or there is no, in fact, abatement there. And again, milk and whey and so on, they're very high BOD products. So again, this is a direct risk to the environment here. So very similar issues. Again, we identified very little in terms of wastewater treatment there. The state, the process technology tends to be in a poor state, not really great process control. You know, they're not really using proper stainless steel equipment up to allow for proper cleaning and sanitation. No CIP systems, cleaning in place systems. The raw water is generally abstracted from rivers, not really very well treated. The water is not metered. So again, people are not really aware of how much water they're using. And I suppose the key issue again is that a lot of the byproducts in here are just really go down the drain. So they're the issues that we're seeing here. And the low cost improvement measures obviously avoid milk products and byproduct sauces, and whey is the big byproduct. Really, we try to find some use for, separate out and collect these product wastes, recycling wastewater where you can. Simple things again, like fitting those valves to hoses to have automatic shut off. Put in your dedicated water meters, dry cleaning where you can. And if they put in proper cleaning in place systems, it's a much more efficient cleaning system for water use, and you can reuse that water again. The design of the whole process is very important from the point of view of efficiency. And again, separating out those you know, clean water that can be recovered from dirty water which can't. We mentioned whey recovery. Like there's a lot of things, there's a lot of protein in whey. There are uses for it, such as it can be used as an animal feed. And if there is no outlet, well then it can be used for land spreading as a fertilizer. And really then the last option, if all of those aren't successful, is to install a wastewater treatment system, and that's an expensive option, but what probably will need to happen in a lot of places, unfortunately. So that's the end of what I have to say, just in terms of our findings on our audits and so on. And we'll come back maybe at the end of the session to talk a little bit more about the recommendations. So Mary, I'll try and end this and hand back to you.
Thank you so much, Tom, and thank you for watching the time as well. I do have to say that having worked on this, I'm eating a lot less meat, just because I'm seeing more about these things than I had in the slaughterhouses that I had in the past. However, I know that there are things that can make it much better, and as a result, I'm very pleased to introduce Bojana Vudinovic and Alexander Kosovic, our project consultants for industrial and municipal sewage pollution abatement, and our consultant for pollution reduction. These are our excellent process engineers who have been working with us and have done some excellent work over the time of the project. Bojana, if I can ask you to please carry on. Great, thank you, Bojana. We cannot hear you at the moment.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Perfect.
Okay,
thank you.
Great. Great. Good morning, and my regards from Belgrade, Serbia. My colleague Alexander and I will present you our work on the preparation of the pollution abatement plan for poultry Georgia. It is developed on the basis of detailed environmental assessment conducted in October and November last year. And also it was further developed later in communication with company representatives and other experts involved in the project. I will present you key elements and methodology behind the plan, and then Alexander will present you in more detail identified measures and action plan as the most important part of the document. First, to explain what is a pollution abatement plan and why it is important. It represents a guideline for the company on how to reduce pollution caused by activities performed on the site and achieve compliance with environmental legislation. In this case, focus was on water pollution, so this plan is step-by-step guideline for the company to reduce water pollution. In addition, pollution abatement plan is a way of communication between a company, competent authority, and funding organization, since it clearly explained the existing issues, approach, measures, necessary investments, financial and environmental impact of proposed measures. What is important? It includes a plan for implementation of identified measures, so it enables the monitoring of progress. This pollution abatement plan is developed specifically for poultry Georgia production site. All production activities carried out on sites such as rearing of broilers, egg production, meat production were considered in preparation of pollution abatement plan, but the focus was on the slaughterhouse since it is activity with major environmental impact. It is developed on the basis of detailed environmental assessment that we conducted, and it included resource efficient and cleaner production assessment, best available techniques assessment, and the benchmarking analysis. Cleaner production assessment included detailed analysis of water consumption and the generation of wastewater, and also preparation of water balance in order to identify all inefficiencies in using of water consumption, to identify losses, and to propose measures for water savings. BAT assessment included comparison of existing technology and practices in the company with the EU standards and practices, and the benchmarking analysis included comparison of specific water consumption, such as cubic meter of used water per ton of product, with numbers and specific water consumption in similar companies in other countries. After detailed assessment, we were able to identify issues related to water consumption and wastewater quality, and to propose measures as the next step in development of pollution abatement plan. So two types of measures were proposed: preventive measures that are related to the reduction of risk of pollution, volume of wastewater or pollution load. And we have another types of measures, so-called the end of pipe measures, where we deal with the waste and the end of the production process. All measures are in line with the EU best available techniques and principles of cleaner production. Also, what is the important factor is size of investments. So we divided no-cost and low-cost measures first, and then measures with investments higher than $2,000. Also, in definition of measures, important step is also to define priorities, especially for the purpose of preparation of the action plan. High priority was to reduce water consumption, since reduction in water consumption leads to the reduction of generation of wastewater and consequently capacity and cost of wastewater treatment plant. Another group of measures as high priority are low-cost measures, since there is high possibility for implementation. The second criteria and priority was pollution prevention. So measures that refer to reduction in the amount of pollutants that end up in the wastewater, and also measures that are easy to implement in terms of complexity and time required. And the third criteria was to reduce risk of contamination of surface and groundwater achieved with the implementation of those measures. Based on assessment, environmental assessment that we conducted, the following conclusions were made. The quality of discharged wastewater from the slaughterhouse is not in line with national emission limit values, and key environmental issue is high organic load in the effluent. Then, based on the benchmarking analysis, water consumption in the slaughterhouse is between 50 and 80% higher than industry benchmark. The precise data number can be determined after continuous monitoring and the implementation of monitoring system, which is also one of those measures. And monitoring of key wastewater parameters and cleaning practice can be improved with implementation of best available techniques. What is proposed solution? And the whole abatement plan is conceived around the design and construction of wastewater treatment plan as the final and the most expensive step in pollution abatement. The proposal is to implement this in 3 phases over the course of 2 years and to allow optimal design of the wastewater treatment plan. Such approach is necessary to allow optimization of water consumption and wastewater generation and optimal design of the future wastewater treatment plan. So the first phase is dedicated to implementation of preventive measures, which result in pollution reduction and reduction of the quantity of generated wastewater and the effluent that will require treatment. And also it includes measurements, flow measurement and sampling point. The second phase is dedicated to design and construction of the primary treatment based on the results of the monitoring from the first stage. And then the third phase is dedicated to design and construction of the secondary treatment. Total investment identified pollution abatement measures is between $500,000 to $1 million, depending on again on the solutions that are connected to the measurements. And it is expected that those measures will lead to reduced water consumption in the slaughterhouse by 27%, or 12,500 cubic meters of water, or it will lead to 13% less of intake water for the whole site. Then this will reduce the volume of the effluent necessary to be treated in the wastewater treatment plant by 30%. And at the end, slaughterhouse wastewater quality will be in line with national emission limit laws. Now my colleague will continue. I will stop sharing screen, and Alexander will present you in more detail measures that we identified.
Well, hello everyone. I'll just try to share now the rest of the presentation. So hopefully everyone can hear me and you can see the presentation, yes? Okay. So during the detailed audit, one of our first tasks was to identify all the processes in which water is used in the plant, also to quantify these water streams and to link them to a specific discharge point. So this was necessary so we will be able to identify and develop measures to reduce the amount of generated wastewater and also to reduce pollution load in the wastewater. So what became apparent is that there's not a lot of data currently to have a clear understanding where and how water is used in the plant. And also you can see here for about a third of the water intake, we could not allocate to a specific use or discharge point. So clearly this is the area where improvements are needed. Also, what we noticed is that all processed wastewater are collected at the same point and discharged from the same point. So there is a potential to reduce the amount of wastewater by simply identifying and separating streams that do not require treatment or may be treated in a different way. So here's some of the examples of the measures that were proposed to the company. These are no-cost and low-cost measures. This first group is aimed for optimization of cleaning, specifically first to for cleaning of reception area and delivery trucks. They both refer to the use of dry cleaning before cleaning with water and use of equipment for cleaning with pressurized water, which is far more efficient. So both should result in reduced volume of wastewater that is generated in these activities and do not require any investment because this equipment already exists in the company. The third one refers to the fitting and use of nozzles and hand-operated triggers on water hoses that are used for cleaning of production hall. This is the measure that will not only reduce the volume of water, but also reduces the running time of the water hoses. And it has very high savings potential, not only for water, but also for energy, because warm water is used for cleaning. Here are a few examples of the measures aimed for optimization or for prevention of excessive use of water. First one refers to the installation of a shut-off valve on a stunning machine so the operator can turn off the water supply to the machine when it's not in use. The second one refers to the training of staff to turn off taps in the evisceration area when they are not used. And another different step forward would be to install automatic shut-off valves with sensors on taps that will turn off water automatically when the taps are not needed. The third one refers to the optimization of water supply on immersion chiller, which is a very significant water consumer in the plant. Company can basically lower the consumption of water by adjusting the water flow in this machine according to the number of birds that are processed each day. Here are a few examples of the measures aimed at reduction of pollution load in the wastewater. First one refers to the collection of solid byproducts and use of plastic containers on trolleys. Basically, byproducts like heads and feet that are cut from the body of the chicken should be collected in this container rather than discarded on the floor. The idea is to reduce the amount of solid organic matter that ends up in wastewater. Another really important measure is to separate and collect blood at the slaughtering station, slaughtering line. This is a measure that has a really high impact on the content of the organic matter in the wastewater and can reduce it sometimes up to 50%. It requires only purchase of a small removable portable tank, and the separated blood can be used as a base for other products or can be just simply sent to the waste treatment facility. One of the really important measures is also to separate clean water that does not require cleaning treatment from the rest of the effluent, like it is discharged from the vacuum pump. This is cooling water, which is clean, and at least it should be discharged separately. A step forward would be to collect this water and reuse it for some other purpose on site. So some examples of the investment projects. Two most important investment projects are implementation of a dedicated monitoring system for water consumption and design and construction of the wastewater treatment plant for the slaughterhouse. Dedicated monitoring system is recommended not just for the slaughterhouse, but for the whole site. This is a widely recognized efficient measure to reduce the amount of water that is used, and required investment is estimated between $9,000 and $11,000 US, and includes purchase and installation of water meters with transmitters and industrial standard computer with software that can process these signals and give an overview of water consumption in the company. Design and construction of the wastewater treatment plant is by far the most important and most expensive measure that is recommended. Required investment is estimated between $500,000 and $1 million US. But this is the measure that will ensure that the emissions from the slaughterhouse are in line with required standards. So preliminary design of the wastewater treatment plant includes equalization tank, which will provide a more constant water flow to the rest of the plant, as well as more consistent composition, pollution load in wastewater for the rest of the plant, which affects performance. Also includes primary physical-chemical treatment, basically flotation and chemical precipitation, and secondary biological treatment. So when we talk about design and construction of the wastewater treatment plant, there are a few important considerations that we need to take into account. First thing is that this is end of pipe measure, which means that it does not affect production process, it does not affect water consumption or volume of generated wastewater. It's highly expensive, and it's designed according to specific volume flow, wastewater, and type of pollutants that are in it. So basically, sizing of the plant directly affects the capital cost. So it is very, very beneficial for a company to implement any measure that can reduce the amount of generated wastewater or pollution load in it, because that will cut down the price of the wastewater treatment plant. Similarly, sizing of the plant also affects the performance of the plant. So design has to be performed on the base of accurate water flow and load measurements, which require time. At this moment, we feel there's not enough data So multi-stage approach is recommended. These measures should be implemented in 3 stages. First stage includes design and construction of equalization tank with equipment for continuous flow monitoring and sampling point that will allow a survey of flow, water flow and pollution load to be undertaken. That according to which in the second stage, preliminary design of the wastewater treatment plant can be validated and final costing and sizing can be performed. The second stage also include design and construction of the primary physicochemical facility. And the final and the third stage includes design and construction of a secondary biological treatment, basically bioreactors according to existing needs at that point. So as Boyana mentioned, the whole pollution abatement plan, implementation of pollution abatement plan, it was conceived around the needs of design and construction of the wastewater treatment plant. As you can see, the first phase, which will last for 1 year, it will include implementation of all preventive measures that can reduce the amount of wastewater and as well as the pollution load in it, and the first stage of wastewater treatment plant. Emphasis is put on the need for a dedicated monitoring system. Therefore, this is the first measure that should be implemented. All these preventive measures should be implemented before the first stage of the wastewater treatment plant is concluded, because to allow these necessary measurements to be undertaken. The second phase includes second stage of wastewater treatment plant and some measures that are not directly linked to the slaughterhouse. It will last 6 months, and the third stage, again, planned to last for 6 months, will include only third stage of the wastewater treatment plant. So by implementing this pollution abatement plan according to the proposed action plan, the company will be able to reduce the water intake for the slaughterhouse, as well as to reduce the amount of wastewater that is sent to the treatment prior to design and construction of the wastewater treatment plant. So compared to the 2018 baseline, the company will be able to, or will have a 27% lower water intake for the slaughterhouse, 30% lower volume of wastewater will be sent to the treatment. The plan will also enable company to allocate all water stream to a specific use and discharge point, and most importantly, it will allow them to have emissions from the slaughterhouse in line with national emission limit values and BAT associated emission limit values. So that's all for us. If there are any questions later, we'll be available, of course, for them. Just like to thank you, representatives of Poultry Georgia, for their hospitality and their patience and time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sasha. I have to say, as a non-engineer, I find this absolutely fascinating and very much appreciate the hard work I know you all have put into this. As my background and many of our backgrounds are also looking at this from a decision-making process as well as an economic process, we have asked Ms. Vanya Pakanan, who is our environmental economist, to share with us her presentation on the results of the economic assessments for the pollution abatement plan. We know that decision makers, as well as company owners, as well as everyone else, wants to know what is the financial cost as well as the benefits of it. And so I'm very happy to have Vanya with us to share that. Vanya, over to you, please, dear.
Thank you, Mary. And before we start, I'd also like to thank all the participants of this workshop and my fellow colleagues, which really made these tasks achievable and make it really smooth. And as you will see, the results are really encouraging. Before I start, let me just point out that what we tried to achieve here was to really not simply having a financial assessment, but a wider economic assessment. Because as Tom rightly pointed out, we were all aware that the size of the facilities in the country is really small. And therefore, when we talk about investing, the amount of money that my fellow process engineers refer to, we are all aware that the financial capacity of the company is limited, and as such, we need to adopt a wider perspective and see whether the investment is worth for the economy as a whole. And that's why this morning I'm going to present you the results of the economic assessment that we carried out in March this year, with the objective of really making the case for investing in pollution abatement technologies in the poultry sector in Georgia, knowing, as I just said, that the size of the facilities is really small, and therefore also the financial means that the single firms have are limited. So really, to make the economic case for investing in pollution abatement technologies, we as a team, we didn't just look at the cost of the implementation cost. That was obviously our starting point, but we also considered the benefits of implementing such measures. And when I refer to benefits, as I will expand in a minute, we definitely consider the financial benefits to the company, but we also consider the benefits to the economy as a whole. So we really adopted a perspective where we were just interested in understanding the private advantages to the company, but also the social, the environmental, and the economic implications of investing in pollution abatement technologies. So just to quickly sum up what we considered, we looked at, as I said, both the cost and the benefit side of the equation. And my starting point was really the excellent estimate that my fellow process engineers supplied to me. And I considered both the investment costs of all the measures that were mentioned in the previous presentations, but also the operation and maintenance cost were referred to, and the refurbishment cost. So the idea was really to consider all the costs that will be incurred in the next 30 years. We adopted a long time horizon, again, because we are interested in understanding if it's worth investing for the economy as a whole. And in this respect, we adopted a longer time frame. On the benefit side, as I said, we didn't simply look at the financial benefit, which is the last item of this list, but we were also interested in monetizing the benefits that are that benefit the society as a whole is in terms of the environmental impacts that are entailed by the pollution abatement technologies. And when I say environmental impacts, I mainly refer to the water consumption reduction that, as Sasha showed, is really important. But we also looked at the health benefits, because once we treat the wastewater and we limit therefore the discharge into the environment, we expect that this lack of exposure to polluted water will entail also health benefits. Let me just be clear. There are lots of really technical details that and assumptions that were made in order to derive the numbers that I'm going to show you in a minute. So I'm not going to present all the technicalities and the assumptions that we made. I'll just mention some of them, but I will be happy to expand on the Q&A sessions in case you have questions. So forgive me that the presentation is concise, but I did it on purpose because I really want to focus on the key messages and the key policy implications, not on the technicalities. But as I said, I will be happy to explain, to expand at the end of the presentation. So moving on to the method we adopted. So the economic assessment approach was totally consistent with the implementation strategy that was explained before by my fellow process engineers, in the sense that even for the economic assessment, we first considered the no regret measures that are essentially the no cost or low cost implementations measures that were presented before. And after considering such measures, we adopted an options appraisal approach. That is, we considered two scenarios, one where we don't invest and the alternative one where we do invest, and we compare the costs and benefits for the two scenarios. In doing that, we adopted a traditional benefit cost analysis framework where we compared over a 30-year period, the total discounted cost and the total discounted benefits. We compare them and we see if it's worthwhile investing. And in order to conclude that the pollution abatement measures are justified from an economic point of view, we need to have positive net benefit or a benefit cost ratio greater than 1. And we will see that we have one scenario where this is the case. Obviously, we are in the economic assessment, we are considering plausible future state of the world. And as such, we have some estimates for the costs that were just presented, and we also derive the estimates for the benefits. But we all know that there is a degree of uncertainty in this estimation exercise, and therefore, to capture the size of this uncertainty, I defined two investment scenarios, one which I labeled the optimistic scenario, and the second one which I labeled pessimistic scenario, really to capture the variability in the investment costs that were presented before. As Sasha and Bojana said, we do have a range for our investment costs. So in defining the optimistic scenario, I consider the lower estimates in this range. Whilst for the pessimistic scenario, I consider the highest boundary of this range. So this is really to be sure that the results, the outcomes of the economic assessment really capture the variability and the uncertainty on both the costs and the benefits estimates that we have. And in line with the pollution abatement plan, we assume that all investments start in year 1 with respect to the no cost, low cost measures, and the wastewater treatment plant is completed in year 2. So again, the economic assessment is totally consistent with the recommendations that were pointed out by my fellow process engineers. So in terms of the outcomes, as I said, we started by considering no regret measures. So in this slide, I showed what we economists call the short-term financial benefits. And these are essentially the savings in operating costs that accrue to the company over a 5-year period. So in this sense, this is a short term because it's considered a limited amount of time. And here I consider some no regret measures, the one with no costs, so at 0 cost. I just consider the 0 cost measures. And as you've seen, simply by changing the way pollution discharges are managed in the production processes, as explained before by Sasha and Boyana, we can get some financial savings that are increasing over time. Looking though at a wider perspective, so by adopting a long-term 30 years planning horizon, and by considering all costs, so that it is to not just financial, but also the cost and all the benefits, so not just the financial benefits, but also the social and the environmental and the health benefits, then we will see that the investment in reduction in pollution reduction technologies is justified in the optimistic scenario, because we get a benefit cost ratio greater than 1. This is a really encouraging outcome from the economic perspective, because this analysis shows that investing even in the most costly options, that is the wastewater treatment plant, because obviously this investment cost is mainly driven by the cost of the wastewater treatment plant, then this high investment from a society, from the economy as a whole point of view, is justified when it comes to the optimistic scenario. In the case of the pessimistic scenario, the benefit cost ratio is not as favorable. This again is mainly driven by we really adopted I include in the analysis the highest estimates for both investment and O&M operation and maintenance costs. And really, what we expect to see is something in between. So from the message really from an economic perspective is that it's worth and really I come to my last slide. It is really worth investing in pollution abatement technologies once we look at the implementation phase, once we take into account the implementation phase carefully, and we, as the process engineers pointed out already, we're first trying to implement preventive measures first. We try to improve the discharge measurement, and then we implement, we invest in the wastewater treatment plant, because in doing that we will minimize the total investment costs, and therefore we will get that investing in the abating completely the pollution loads is justified also from an economic perspective. And although I carried out the economic assessment only on at the firm level, just to by considering the information I had for the Poultry Georgia site facility, we can conclude that this policy recommendation is applicable to the whole sector, because as Tom said, we have the size of the facilities is quite uniform across the country. And just to conclude by adopting a wider perspective, there's been, as you're all aware, there's been a global debate going on how to better recover from the current pandemic, and ensuring an effective water management is one of the measures. So I really believe that this analysis has the merit of showcasing how we can better manage our water resources on the field. So yeah, thanks again for your attention. And as I said, I skipped lots of technical details because I really didn't want to confuse the picture. I focused on the main messages, but let me reiterate this point. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have on the technical points in the Q&A session. Thanks, Mary. I hope I use my time. Not
perfectly. Yeah. Thank you. And again, it's so important to realize that there is an economic benefit to making the environment a priority. And Vanya, your work has been very much appreciated across the region for this, and specifically to help us show how investing in this is actually not just an investment in the environment, but also is an investment in future money saving and future investments that will have a significant return. We now are turning over to Tom, and Boyana will join in for recommendations for the next steps and future actions. Tom, if you are there with the presentation.
Yes, indeed.
All right,
Hopefully
great.
you can hear me, and hopefully you can see the slides.
We can hear you. I don't see the slide yet.
Oh, sorry, I got to push that share button. There you go.
There you go. Great.
Well,
now over to you, hon.
Okay, so yes, so we put together some recommendations for the future, and I suppose one of the challenges obviously is to try to keep this reasonably short. We could probably talk about recommendations for the future until the end of the day, but in any event, we try to condense them down. If people are interested, there are recommendations in a lot of our other reports, much more detail than what I'm going to present here, but this is a summary of those. So again, to try and condense these down, I suppose we would say really the road ahead at the institutional level or at the ministry side, we see a number of challenges, I suppose, or initiatives which are underway. And that's really in relation to the improvement of the overall regulation of the industries and the facilities in Georgia. So it kind of needs improvement of the existing water permits or indeed the integrated permits, and we understand that Georgia is in the process of implementing IPPC and IED type permitting requirements in the legislation. So that's good, but it takes a bit of time and effort to make sure that those permits are correctly written and that they are correctly enforced. So one of the key elements, I suppose, that's needed there will be ongoing training. We've provided training under the project, but I mean, training is a lifelong activity, and in an organization, we never stop training, and we always have more to learn. And I think in general, the recognition that this process of integrated permitting, and even for water permits, is something that has to be done across multiple departments or units within the ministry. It isn't something that can be done just by an individual or an individual department. Certainly integrated permitting, it cuts across all of the areas that we are working in. And in IED, we have to look at air, we have to look at waste, we have to look at land, we have to look at water as well as an important part of that. We also have to look at this whole area of cleaner production and sustainability and so on. A key element is really improving the enforcement of the existing legislation. There are measures already in the existing legislation that could be better applied. Yes, there are challenges for sure, but I think that the application of existing legislation could improve things, and perhaps considering more dedicated enforcement teams, maybe even at a national level, so that experience can be concentrated in a single team within Georgia for the bigger industries, particularly. Because it takes quite a while to become upskilled in how to go in and do those site inspections and uncover what needs to be done in large industries. More training for inspectors, and an improvement in the sanctions and how they can be applied within the country. One of the other things, again, I had a slide on this, and because I thought I had too many slides, I cut it down, but it's very important, I think, to continually raise industry's awareness of not only the regulatory requirement, but also the more general benefits for implementing proper environmental sustainability within your business. And if possible, you know, there should be more supports there for industry to allow them to do that. So what we're saying at the institutional level in terms of initiatives you might consider is really just continued training and awareness. As we say, it never stops. I mean, the competent authorities need support for training the permit writers, whether that's in EIA, IPPC, or water pollution or waste management. That the field is always changing, and there's an amount of core skills that you have to be proficient in order to write an effective permit. You know, we would see that obviously the staff again, training has been provided in environmental monitoring, but it's an ongoing process as well. More training for inspection, and again, training of the company representatives, the HSE managers or the technical directors, to get these principles and concepts embedded into the companies is very important, because that's really where the change is actually going to happen. And it's also important to I suppose, reach out to the broader professional base in terms of the consultants that are out there providing assistance to the industries and those private labs that are doing sampling and analysis, effectively to raise the whole competency level of people working in the area. So for the larger industries, I mean, as I said, getting out the key messages that it's not just about legislation. I mean, one of the key things, and Vanya mentioned this initiative in Europe of I suppose we see the whole greening of the supply chain has been very important, and the whole area of sustainability. And actually, when I was in Georgia, we visited a brewery to have some discussions there, and I looked up on the shelf, and there was a very popular Irish beer on the shelf, and I thought, wow, what's that doing here? And it turns out that this brewery is actually brewing that product under license for a large brewing company. So you know, these large companies, multinational companies, they have their own set of environmental requirements that they will expect their suppliers to follow, and that's really where so much more of the pressure is going to come on at this point in time. Just have regard to BAT, there's lots of different guidance, but that BAT is really the benchmark now that industries are compared against. And again, systems like ISO 14000 environmental management systems, these are all initiatives which provide assurance to both your customers and to the regulators that you are managing your industry responsibly. And there are going to be more legislative requirements coming in on environmental liability and environmental damage, and so you know there's going to be more oversight to make sure that industry are operating effectively and responsibly. And in general, it's an ever-changing field, but it's very important that any monitoring that's done within industry is done correctly. So important that if you have your own monitoring capability, that it complies with the proper principles of monitoring and the latest standards and techniques. And probably more realistically, that when you're bringing on board laboratories or consultants, that you ensure that they have proper accreditation to undertake the monitoring that you need. More specifically, we would say we think it's a good idea, very good idea, that companies would prepare a pollution abatement plan focusing on the use of cleaner production, and I suppose trying to develop out all of the measures which are needed to address environmental compliance issues. We think that the plan that Sasha has produced is a good template, and that's something that maybe should be adopted in Georgia. We're using the EU BREF documents, as I said, as a reference. They have not just information on compliance standards, but there's a lot of information in those about process and the the best approach to minimize waste. And I mean, waste is money at the end of the day. It's raw materials that you're putting into your process, and if it's coming out the other end, it's money you're losing. So there's a lot of excellent information in those documents, not only about protecting the environment, but about running a sustainable business. Ideally, we think that these pollution abatement plans that are produced by the industry, that the outputs of those would be written into the permit by the ministry. And so these timelines, for example, that Sasha showed there in terms of achieving these goals, certainly in Ireland for a long time, we have written those milestones into our permits to make sure that the company actually delivers on the agreement that we have made with them. And I think that's key. So for large facilities, we're saying support the pollution abatement plan that has been developed for Georgia Georgia Poultry to help them to implement those. We would say that the ministry should work, as I said, to include those in the environmental permit, or if the permitting process isn't there, to maybe form some sort of an agreement with the company to make sure that that's locked down as much as we can. There are some elements that are still open in the plan, particularly in relation to the final configuration of the wastewater treatment plant, because there's still some data outstanding there. And those elements should obviously be agreed in line with the BAT standards. And it would be great if the company would then act, I suppose, as a reference site for the pollution abatement plan approach, so that they can kind of communicate to other industries, you know, the steps they went through and what the benefits are and how this whole process has worked for them. So there's some of the initiatives we think would be great to take ahead on the pollution abatement plan. Small facilities, I mean, we've discussed this and we've discussed the fact that there's a lot of small facilities, particularly in the slaughtering and dairy sector, the sectors we looked at in Georgia. And this is a complicated area, and it's very hard to say these are the 3 or 4 things you should do about small facilities. Ultimately, I suppose my own experience, or the experience in Ireland, and that we see, is that small facilities, the challenge are going to primarily be on health and safety and veterinary standards. That whole level of standards that you need to meet in the processing of food products, that just goes up, and the investment requirements for that become pretty substantial. And what we see is that there's a lot of investment needed by small businesses to comply with this. And ultimately, as a very small business, you cannot generate the amount of money you need to comply with these standards. Environmental standards add an additional overhead to that. So what we certainly see over time is that those small facilities become bigger, they coalesce, and they end up becoming bigger companies who can comply with these requirements. So the thing that we need to be conscious of as that process evolves is that these enterprises, which are getting bigger, are located in the right place. If we have food companies, dairy facilities, and slaughterers located in very sensitive areas, then they're going to have very high environmental costs, because the standards are going to be very high and the wastewater treatment requirements are going to be very high. So spatial planning for the evolution of these sectors is very important. So, I mean, I think that, and I know that there are various strategies for developing these sectors. I think perhaps the whole environmental aspect of that needs to be written into those strategies a bit more. We tend to look at these strategic development things very much on an economic level, but we need to kind of remind ourselves that that environmental element has to be taken into account. I think it's, as Vanya has outlined, from the economic aspect also. So harder to put some recommendations, but we would say at least that for small facilities, the regulators should check that they're complying with the existing standards, which is difficult, I know, but and they should have regard to these recommendations we put in the compliance plan. You know, these low-cost initiatives for reducing the amount of pollution, segregating out the high pollutant things like blood and whey and milk, stopping them getting to the water course, you know, reducing the amount of water, putting in some sort of primary treatment. All of these measures will have a positive impact. So these are the kind of things that we need to focus on for these small facilities. And then possibly some of the things that donors should consider is setting up what we would call incubation initiatives, or providing some supports to educate these small processors about improved process standards, the whole concept of cleaner production and what that means, and improved wastewater management. You know, to provide supports for those smaller facilities which are likely to grow, and just be conscious of the fact that we need to kind of make them grow in that sustainable way as much as we can. So that's the broad set of recommendations. As I said, it was quite hard to, you know, to try and come up with just a very reduced number of recommendations, and we can clearly discuss this more in the session that's to follow. So I'll leave it there for the moment, Mary.
And it's definitely a testament to how much there is to do and how dedicated you all have been to all of this. I think we can get into some of that in the discussion, but thank you so much for that very important set of recommendations. Before we open up the discussion for about 5 minutes, we will hear from Ms. Nelly Korkotadze, the Deputy Head of Environmental Supervision Department, Chief State Inspector for Ministry of Environment Protection and Agriculture, speaking on the country perspectives on implementation of pollution abatement and cleaner production approaches. Nelly, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good afternoon, everybody. I welcome all of you. I am happy to be able to share with you the future plans that Environment Protection Department has with this regard. I probably will repeat and I will mention once again how important this project is, including from the standpoint of the inspectorate capacity building. We have selected very important sectors that, despite the fact that in this sector we have mainly small enterprises, I think they still have a very significant impact on the surface water qualities. And if we look at from this other standpoint, this it was quite kind of a lesson for the companies, because they would learn what they shall pay attention to in their facilities, and what will help them also to reduce their expenses. So we are the authority that carries out the inspection and control in such kind of facilities. With regard to the environmental problems, we have regional offices throughout Georgia, and we'll continue working in the same format in the future. And we are planning also to carry out building capacity activities for our staff, and also we're going to add the staff. And what we are doing, we are actually taking samples. We are checking the compliance of the companies with the regulations and the commitments that they have undertaken. And also, the water management is one of the priority areas for the supervision department. And we are we are acting on basis of the law on water, currently existing law on water. Of course, it's a little bit obsolete, and you probably know that we have prepared new draft law on water. And also we are checking this is an interrupted process. there are very important challenges, and we recognize that we had a really very important, and we still have very important challenges. We have prepared very important documents. The project has prepared very important documents. They have studied these sectors that are having impact, and also I can't avoid mentioning that for one of the companies like for poultry Georgia, the perfect document, perfect guidelines has been prepared for avoiding the pollution. And this document includes and describes all those steps, how the company shall come into compliance with the national legislation and what issues should be paid attention to in the first place. I would also say that this is very important, not only for companies, but also for or inspectorate, but also for all the other departments of the ministry that are making decisions on this or that activity, and also for the policymakers who are developing certain policies in this sector. These photos, which you can see on the screen, these are the actual photos. They are, it's a reality. That's from the meat producing sector. And unfortunately, we have very high organic pollution from these facilities. In the wastewater, we have high contents of blood as a rule, and also the animal waste byproducts, the contents of byproducts in the surface water bodies also very high. And it's very important, and my colleagues have mentioned this very often, it's very important to build the capacities of the companies themselves, to build the capacities of the environmental managers, to make them focus on the problems that or issues that might exist in these facilities. We also have very many challenges in our country with regards to the management of the animal waste. Unfortunately, we do not use the animal waste or for the to use them as a food. We don't use them as a food for the domestic animals, and so ultimately all this waste goes to the either to the surface water bodies or to the landfills, and this causes very significant pollution of the environment, as you know. And so everything that relates to the animal waste is very weakly developed in our country. So also the dairy production is one of the very, very important polluters in our country, and our experts have identified this in their documents. And we always had the problems in the inspection process because they are using excessive amounts of water, and this in the quote marks, this can be a trick, because when the companies are using very huge volumes of water in order to dissolve the pollutants which are getting to the surface waters, but still we still find the pollutants in the surface water bodies. One of the important problems is that on the areas when they have the sewage systems, as a rule, the companies discharge very polluted waters into the sewage system, and then this is over polluting the sewage systems, and then the sewage systems are polluting environment in their turn. And so very many consultants have seen these very big problems in this field, and I think that the providers shall strengthen control with this regard based on the contract conditions. We should check how these conditions are observed because they are discharging untreated wastewaters. So for us it was very important, and I will have to repeat this because I am really very open in this regard. So for us, it was very important to develop the sectorial so-called guidelines. We shall know what we shall be paying attention to in the inspection process, and of course, it's very important to introduce the blood separation practices. Also, with regard to the serum management, it's very important, and also today we have very important problems with this regard, and we'll pay attention to this. And our inspectors have taken quite intensive trainings on these issues, and thank you very much to the project for this opportunity. Very many inspectors have been trained, including the regional offices, and they have received very important information about BAT. They know what to pay attention to. And of course, the pollution of the environment with the waste still remains a big challenge, and it will remain a challenge in the future. But that's very important to get knowledge about BATs, which our inspectors received in the trainings. And also Tom said about the improvement of the legislation and achieving some kind of compliance. I would like to notify you that we have already submitted to the Parliament the draft law on the environmental liability, which has already passed one hearing in Parliament, and now we are waiting for the second hearing, and we are waiting that the Parliament will approve this law on the environmental liability. And this will be very important law in case of damages caused to the environment. And you might know also that in the ministry we have the initiative, the law on the industrial pollutions, and we are now discussing this draft with all the stakeholders, and also environmental assessment code came into force on January 1, 2018, and the new draft law of Georgian water has been already prepared, and I'm sure that it will be initiated very soon. As for the sanctions, we think that when the country will pass the new law on water, and which will determine certain liabilities, we will also launch new sanctions, which will be prevention oriented, and they will have some prevention effect. And we also are planning to build the capacities of the inspectorate. We will add 16 new staff members throughout the country, and we will be training and retraining them. And this always remains an agenda. They need the permanent training, permanently receiving knowledge, and also it's very important that these consulting companies that are working in this field, and also to the consulting company, but companies that are working in the field, we should be working for raising their awareness. So this will help us, because we will help inspectors within the companies who will be preventing these risks from the very beginning. And the risks that might become financial expenses for the companies in the future, and they will try to avoid such expenses. So thank you very much. I wanted to, that's all I wanted to tell about the future plans, and thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nelly, for your great support and your wonderful presentation. Actually, thank you to all of our participants, because it has been very interesting. Even though I've been in this for a long time, it's been very interesting to see and hear from everyone about where we are as we are wrapping up. There were a number of questions that were sort of raised, or potential comments raised. I would like to ask people, participants who would like to raise a question, you have the ability to raise your hand. That's within the chat section, or you can write a question within the chat section also. One thing, while people are thinking about the questions they may want to ask, that thank you so much, Nelly, for mentioning the trainings that the Kura Project did. We are in the process now of translating those and preparing those to be part of an online course that will be made available for the public as well. So companies and inspectors and those who are interested in that can all access this and learn from that. So those trainings were not just a one-time event. Those will have been preserved and captured and translated, and are being shared either through the very detailed presentations, PowerPoint presentations, and in some cases we're actually able— It's 12:30. Thank you, Fiona. We're actually able to also have the presentations done with the transcripts transcribed and turned into videos. with audio that will be even more interesting. Ahmed, I'm getting a note that my internet connection is unstable, and so I'm going to ask you to facilitate so that there's not an issue of me dropping out in the middle of this.
Okay, thank you, Mary. And I think we need to hear from the company representative from Poultry, Georgia, because he mentioned earlier that he has some comments, and then others who wants to raise questions, they can come after. Okay, so the floor is for Mr. Zuro.
Welcome once again, all of you. First of all, I would like to thank all of you, and also I would like to apologize for technical problem which I had in the beginning. I would like to thank UNDP. I would like to thank also Ministry or Department of the Environment Protection and Agriculture for their involvement. Also, I would like to thank Mr. Alexander Makabiskoyana, yes, for implementing such a brilliant project. I would like also to thank my staff members who were involved, and ultimately, actually, we have received this project, which we really need. But I have a few questions which arose in me in this presentation, during this presentation. So these 2 years, which you think that it's necessary, that it's sufficient to develop on this project. So how is it possible in the COVID conditions to do all this within these 2 years? Because I want to tell you that few projects that were planned for optimization of our enterprise, and also I have already made the financial investments, but these projects were stopped because our counterpoint organizations were unable to arrive to us and make something on the spot. Also, plus I wanted to. I've been looking here, and here some representatives of the several countries are involved in our conference. And our company has been established in 2002, and by then we've been in compliance with all legislation. After this, we been investing and came up to this top point. And this slaughterhouse, which we have, which is a very important part of this project, we have built it in 2010, and by that time, this slaughterhouse satisfied more or less all this legislation existing then in the country. But now we have to, during this 2 years, we have to make an investment of $500,000 to $1 million. And Ms. Anya said that we are not considering the, so we'll have also this other questions, Mrs. Vanya, with Ms. Vanya, and I will ask her when I will have possibility in the future. But I want to say, in your countries, what is the involvement of the state? So are there any grants? Because it's very difficult to recover, to take the $1 million from the turnover, which is not planned, and to use it for something else. So do you have the questions, the answers to this question, so you can maybe calm me down, or what do you think about those 2 years?
Okay.
Also, I want to stress that we really are we find difficult to communicate with the foreign partners.
Yeah, I think, yeah, you have two inquiries, one related to the COVID-19 and the impact of COVID-19 on the implementation of this pollution abatement plan. And the second one about the financing of this required for the building this water treatment plant, and how can the other countries experience on helping or supporting the facilities in implementing this compliance action plan. So maybe I don't know who can take the first one about the COVID. Maybe Alexander or or Boyana?
Okay, I'll say a few words just. Well, this plan was prepared when we were living in a different world without COVID. So yes, absolutely. I think the COVID will affect, the current situation will affect the time frame that is proposed. But I think the proposed plan is basically like a showcase, a starting point for discussion with the ministry or competent authority of any kind, or a funding organization. Then you can maybe adjust the time frame according to the current situation. But this is, let's say, a starting point to then try to estimate what would be the realistic time frame for the implementation in a current situation.
Yeah.
Also, would like to say on the second part of the question, we do understand the problem, and it is the same for our industry as well. Once you build something, you invest something, the environmental laws constantly change, so you're always one step behind, basically. But this is an ongoing process everywhere, in every country. Just depends where at this point the country is maybe some countries closer to these standards, some is more further behind. So the amount of investment and the work ahead is maybe lower, but it's a constant thing. Usually industry relies on credit lines or investors or any kind of programs that are state facilitated that help them to comply with environmental legislation. So this is one really important aspect to take into account, that external funding and help to achieve environmental standards are available in different countries.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tom.
Can I just add just two things, I suppose. One, on the timeline, I suppose it was our understanding initially that the situation with Poultry Georgia was that you were being asked to build a treatment plant based on the existing requirement from the ministry. And I think what we tried to demonstrate, or that with the pollution abatement plan, was that it would be good practice to try all of these cleaner production initiatives before the treatment plant is built. So we set out the plan, I suppose, in that context, and an unconstrained plan, you could say. In our own situation in permitting industries, we would, of course, have discussions with the company when we write these timelines into the permit, and we would take on board the financial situation of the company, the monies available, and so on. That's balanced with the level of impact that the current discharge from the company are having on the receiving environment. So there is a balance in terms of the timeline that a regulator can give a company to achieve a certain environmental standard. And I suppose just to pick up on Sasha's point, I suppose to highlight in the European context, yes, that these standards are always changing, and but when you get a permit, you have a period of certainty for whatever the life of the permit is. And when we see changes in our BAT guidance, in general, the European Commission gives a period of 4 years from when they publish the standard to the implementation at the industry level. So like I say, there's a lot of things, a lot of moving parts in the actual final timeline that will be agreed with the company. But we certainly in Ireland do it on a case-by-case basis. Again, generally in Europe, there isn't state aid for building, or putting in place environmental abatement. This is kind of seen as an integral part of business cost, and would be seen to be a kind of an illegal subvention from our description. But I'm not sure of the the situation in Georgia. I mean, clearly we're recommending here that there are, you know, that perhaps a donor will get involved with this demonstration project of how this should be done at a national level.
Yeah, Mary, you.
Can I add a point on the
Yeah, sure.
on the financial implications? I didn't mention during my presentations that in preparing the economic assessment, I take into account the guidelines for economic assessment given by international donors, like for instance the European Investment Bank, exactly to make the plan bankable, so to make it possible to go and ask for financial support by the international donors. So for instance, just to give you an example, I conducted economic assessment by using the discount rate that the European Investment Bank recommended. So the economic assessment, as it has been carried out, is totally in line with the requirements made by the European Investment Bank. And this is to facilitate the process of finding external financial sources. Yeah, exactly. And so I thank Mr. Chuchulashvili for his question, because it's really to the point that obviously we have implementation issues, and one of the implementation issues is really to find the capital needed to implement the plan. And in this respect, the economic assessment, as I said, has been designed to help you in that phase.
Yep. From my point of view, I will tell you for the second part about the financing, our experience in Egypt, because I was chairing the environmental agency. And what we did actually, because we have lots of problems in water pollution, like in industries. And what we did, we initiated a fund called Industrial Pollution Prevention Fund. And this, we collected the donors, the KfW, GIZ, JICA, World Bank, and they all make a pool of about $170 million to give soft loans for the facilities who wish to have compliance action plans like your facility. And this is with with no interest, and it is with a grace period of about 2 years. And after you finish your compliance action plan successfully, and we monitor your performance for 1 year with no violations, you get 20% as a grant from this loan. So, and this project actually helped a lot of industries in the country to comply, because we found out that there are many factories wants to comply, but they don't have the financial resources. So the agency worked with the international donors to create this fund for industrial pollution prevention fund. This is our experience in Egypt. Any other questions from the participants?
Hamed, there's a question for me in the chat that I can quickly address from George. He asked to expand on how I assess the social benefits. As I said before, by social, it is really social and environmental benefits related to the reduction of water consumption at the plant level. And to estimate this, I refer to, so essentially the approach is, once you save water at the facility level, that water is available to other users, and you don't have to develop additional water sources. So in order to estimate this benefit, you look at the approach is to look at the cost of providing water alternative sources. And so what I did was to consider the average provision cost for Georgia, for the country as a whole, and then apply it to the amount of water consumed. I hope this answers your question, and I'm happy to address it offline if needed, because I'm conscious of the time. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Vania. And I can't see any hand raised.
Oh,
Yes,
Ahmed,
yes.
Sarah has another question for us.
Exactly. Go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
Talking about water supply, if I talk specifically about this issue, if we are counting it in US dollars, 1 cubic meter of water costs 80 cents. So industrial water that we receive. But within our facility, Ahmed knows about it, I believe Mr. Ahmed knows about it. Within our own premises, we have our own wells. We are pumping our own water. And this is not, this is registered with environmental department. So actually it's cheaper for us. It's very cheap for us as compared to what it would have been if we were supplied by the company. So reduction of consumption by 30% in my case won't have significant financial impact given today's reality, because I have my own water. This is just a comment that I wanted to make.
Yeah, yeah, it may not have economical impact on your company, but it will have on the national for the water availability in the future. And maybe you have now on the well water that you can take it, but in few years, if you have droughts or something, you will need to have, but to dig this deep water well deeper, and also the energy used for taking this water from the well, it costs money. It is not free of charge, right?
Okay. Can I just add, Ahmed, actually one of the biggest costs of water is the treatment. And so when you get into, you know, the big benefit is reducing the volume of water you're sending forward to your wastewater treatment, because yes, the capital investment costs are very high, but actually when you look over a 20 or 30 year period for a treatment plant, it's the operational costs, the energy costs, chemical costs, and all of these go up directly proportionally to the volume of water you're actually treating. So it's very important to try and minimize the volume you're sending forward for treatment.
Just one thing, because of the time limit, we could not get into the cost of water, but we did, within the pollution abatement plan, try to estimate the exact cost of water based on all associated costs with distribution of water and use of water.
Thank you. David Gergliani, yes, go ahead.
I'm on English channel, I think.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think Tom and Alexander have already given the answer. Actually, the cost of the water is not only cost of water extraction, it's water treatment prior to use and wastewater treatment as well.
Exactly.
Reduction of in long-term perspective, reduction of the water extraction, water usage will give significant effect. And so risk for the facility in terms of long-term losing the water is not high, because the water source which is used is very reliable at the moment. However, this water needs treatment. It's pretty salty, and also it needs treatment prior to the technical use. This is what I just wanted to mention.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Any other comments, questions?
Ahmed, let me ask one, since I am not a hydrologist. It seems to me that if groundwater is being withdrawn and untreated wastewater is being discharged, isn't there an impact on the groundwater as a result of that? Or a potential groundwater, especially over time, if that's not dealt with?
Yeah, sure. Yes, exactly. Any abstraction, if you don't have a renewable aquifer, the more abstraction will deplete the groundwater. And also the direct cost for extracting this water from the well to the facility will cost also. So it's not only the resource itself as a valuable resource, but also the cost of the energy.
And the post-treatment as well.
Yeah, I think the point, Mary, as well, particularly where you're abstracting groundwater, and I think we would have seen on a number of facilities, are the measures in place to protect against spillage and spillage to ground, you know, particularly of chemicals and hazardous materials, because you know your groundwater is so important. So if that gets contaminated, that's your source gone, and then you have an immediate cost. You're going to have to get public supply in. So those protection in terms of storage of chemicals and you know avoiding discharges to ground are very critical.
True.
That's what I was shooting for. Thank you, Tom.
Any other questions, comments? I think we finished the discussions. So back to you, Mary.
Sorry, Ahmed. I have one last point on the benefits. The estimates are a bit conservative, but obviously it was mentioned at some point at the workshop, the fact of recovering materials and making a better use of resources in general, not just water. That particular aspect wasn't included in the economic assessment, but obviously once we optimize the resources used, the benefits that can derived from the water pollution abatement plans will be bigger. So again, this reinforces the need to look at the implementation phase by adopting a wider perspective. Sorry to interrupt on this point.
Absolutely valid. Thank you. Does anyone else want to make another comment following up? Yes, Zara, please.
I would like to address Ms. Vanya, if possible. If you can share with us as a presentation, not maybe presentation, but more detailed results. The one with more precise and more elaborated outcomes, the one that she mentioned, not this concise presentation itself. I would be grateful to have it.
We produce a report for the project. So Ahmed and Mary, I'm happy for you to share it.
It's already shared with the company.
Okay, sorry.
In the national language. Yeah.
Great. Perfect. Yeah. So all the technical details that I mentioned are included in the technical report I prepared for the project.
Yep.
Thank you.
And we will follow up with Maka Julakidze to make sure that she gets that in your hands, because I think this is a very important factor, that not only is there an environmental benefit, but an economic benefit to this as well. So we look forward to knowing in the future how you're able to use this. Okay, we are running just about as we realized we would be. I want to thank everyone very much for being here. One very important aspect of this is when Ahmed and I were beginning to explore what was needed for the upcoming project, in 2015. We met with a number of representatives from the donor agencies, and we were discussing pollution abatement and water quality. And they said to us at the time, we would love to see a pollution abatement pre-feasibility study. We know that that needs to happen. We know that this is important. And that is where we are interested in focusing our resources. That was in 2015, so long before COVID. But I think one of the things we are seeing now is there is a very strong emphasis on the donor community, on the development community overall, as well as in the private sector on building in the post-COVID or soon to be post-COVID, era, building back with more sustainability and with more long-term benefits that can be realized as the economy starts to recover from this. One other aspect that I think is very important to mention is we have also spent a lot of time with both representatives of the United Water Supply Company of Georgia and with Georgia Water and Power, both of whom have made very clear that one of the big problems they encounter is industries discharging wastewater that hasn't had treatment into the municipal wastewater systems, and that can really overload a wastewater system very, very easily, as those are very expensive systems, and they are actually difficult to maintain if they become seriously overloaded, especially with some industrial contaminants. Therefore, this component of this project was developed so that we could showcase both the benefits of protecting the water resources and reducing discharges, but also the benefits to the infrastructure, the very costly infrastructure that already exists. And so we are looking forward, as our project is winding down. The Kura project will conclude all of the implementation work within this year and be phasing out very, very quickly after that. So we will be keeping up with as much as we can in the next several months, but we really encourage everyone who has been in this meeting to maintain close contact with one another. And we will provide to everyone here a list of the contact information for everyone here, including those of you from different organizations and different companies and different agencies. I can honestly say, having worked in Georgia, wow, over the past 20 years, it is so exciting to see that we are now at a point where we've gone from the monitoring and the assessment to the actual implementation and updating and changing of the laws and of the practices and applying those newer policies, newer approaches that we've seen here to protect the very precious water resources in the Kura River Basin. I'd like to thank everyone who has been with us today, all of our presenters, for your time and for your great effort, including and especially Nelly and Marina Makarova, as well as Marina Arabidze and Alina Bakaradze from NEA. I want to thank our colleagues from UNDP.
It's 1 o'clock.
Thank you. UNDP Country Office in Georgia, who we look forward to sharing all of the final results with, and hopefully more work moving forward, potentially with this in the future. I want to thank representatives from the companies, including United Water Supply Company and Georgia Water and Power. I very much appreciate Poultry Georgia and Zurab especially for his great support in letting us access his facility and being so very open and welcoming to the work that we have been doing there, because without you, this demonstration project would not have happened. So thank you so much. To wrap up, I also very much want to thank Ahmed and Maka and Hajar and the team with the Kura project, and Sira as well. And especially also I want to thank our translators for their great work, Arakali and Georgi, who it's always been a pleasure to work with. We will have this recording online, hopefully by the end of this week, available through our YouTube channel and through our webpage, and have this open if anybody wants to go back and refer to it. And again, thank you all so much for your great work, for the hard work, and for the very important work of sustaining the very precious natural resources of the most amazingly beautiful country, Georgia. Thank you all. I wish you all a wonderful day, and look forward to being in touch with everyone again. Didi Madlog, thank you very much, and have a great afternoon. Thank you, everyone. Have a great time. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thanks for the translator.
Bye-bye.
Yes, absolutely. Our wonderful translators.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everybody.